Bichara Supply Chain, highlighting and showcasing solutions for the most complex challenges facing the industry in 21st century by our team of subject matter experts and mentors, broadcasting every week all year round. We will present the most up-to-date series of podcasts and webinars.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bichara Supply Chain. This is Norhadi house, and we have very special guest today, Patrick Van Hool from Kinaxis. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about supply chain optimizations. Why is it important for supply chains? What are some features of effective supply chain optimization, and etc. But before that, can you please brief a bit about yourself, your professional background, and how did you get up into this role at Kinaxis?
Yeah, it's a kind of a long story, as is most careers in supply chain. And certainly I started as a practitioner. I was an industrial engineer, graduate from the University of Michigan, and I had the opportunity to go work at Dell in Austin, Texas, in their Palmer North 1 server manufacturing facility. And that was my first extended experience within supply chain. As part of that, certainly developed a depth of knowledge about that Dell supply chain, but also began to appreciate that everything's a supply chain. And carried over that experience into go working for Rio Tinto Minerals, the industrial minerals group of the global mining company. From there, I went to go work for Apple in supply demand management, which again allowed me to see some of the connections, some of the similarities in supply chain planning and strategy and how it carried over from one industry to the next. That led me to CVS Health. Certainly it was an opportunity to go work in the retail pharmacy environment and opportunity to manage $1 billion plus worth of purchases to fill those CVS retail stores within the United States. At that point, my network actually came into play, and I was given the opportunity to go work for a company called SCM World. SCM World was a think tank type of company where we worked with a number of senior supply chain executives to help them formulate their strategies, to work with their extended teams on building out some of the supply chain capabilities that were most important to their future success. SCM World was purchased by Gartner and certainly was then part of Gartner for a brief period of time. And through both of the SCM World and Gartner engagements, I actually first came to know Kinaxis. It was at that point in time I met our CEO, John Sicard, and our Chief Strategy Officer, Ann Robinson, was actually a member of the SCM World community. So I worked with her extensively through that. So because of that network, certainly when this opportunity came available from the Kinaxis side, it seemed like a natural fit. And it's been a really tremendous opportunity to work with a relatively young organization within Kinaxis as we work in the Office of Strategy. Myself, Polly Mitchell-Guthrie, and Tracy McIntyre make up our industry outreach and thought leadership team. And so it's a fantastic opportunity to blend that practitioner and that thought leadership expertise.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's move to the first question. Talking about the optimization, what does it mean, optimization, in the context of supply chains, Patrick?
You know, optimization has this connotation that it's perfect. And I think one of the things that is easy to confuse about optimization and supply chain is that it's based on a moment. You understand a set amount of data at a point in time, and you do the thing that's best for your business. And I think that's one of the things that supply chains have done over time successfully, is to constantly deal with what's in front of them, make the best decision in the moment, and try to act in a way that is creating the most value. Over time, supply chains have been tasked with many, many things. People are exceptionally busy in supply chain. And so I think this idea of optimization certainly is morphing to making the best decision in the moment and then doing it over and over again. Certainly it's not the scenario that we see, especially with COVID and the things that we've seen in 2020, is that you'll know all of the information in a given moment. So how do you take what's available to you? How do you assess it? How do you make a decision that is beneficial to your business? And then how do you take action on that? And so the optimization process isn't just knowing what's perfect, but it's about knowing how to act based upon the options that you have available.
Right. And why is supply chains optimization important?
It's important just because we've gotten to this standpoint where there's so much work to do that it's very difficult to identify what creates the most value in many cases. And it's very difficult to have all of the information that's available. And so optimization becomes an exercise in pulling people together to make the decisions based upon the information, looking at the same sets of information, acting quickly. And it's important in supply chain because things change so very quickly. So it's about really understanding in that moment what's important, what the characteristics are of the situation that drive the decision you're about to make. And that's where we see the opportunity for many companies is to filter down that work, to make the decisions, to put everybody in the situation where they're acting concurrently. And it's not necessarily about making the perfect decision, but it's about being able to act with agility and responding to the circumstances as they come. So it's not a forever concept, optimization. It's more about what's the right thing to do right now. What's the best thing that you can do, and how can you do that repeatedly?
In your personal view, what are key features of effective supply chain optimization?
I mean, I think that there's the need for people first and foremost. As much as we see the need for advanced technologies, for artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, we still very much need the contextualization that people bring to this. And certainly being able to understand the intricacies of the supply chain and how things interconnect. It's important that we're making decisions based upon the entirety of our supply chain, not just in a functional silo. And in many cases, the metrics we're dealing with, the objectives we're dealing with can be contradictory between those silos. So we need to break down those walls. And optimization really gives us a chance to assess some of those things. And we think about it at Kinaxis about the ability to run concurrent scenarios, to be able to test the things that may impact your supply chain, and then understand what options you have coming out of that. And it isn't the case where you'd be able to run a scenario for every possible circumstance, but it's important to recognize what's most likely to happen, what has the biggest impact to your business, and really segmenting your strategies based upon what you think is most important in that moment and putting the people in the position to make the decisions. And that's something that I think is really growing. It's something that I've heard from a number of chief supply chain officers, is that the escalation process that has existed in supply chain historically has now become a bit of a bottleneck. And in some cases, decisions are rising to the level of chief supply chain officer about things that they don't need to be dealing with. You want your executives to be that visionary, that leader that's thinking about the future, not necessarily thinking about something that's a bit more tactical. So how do we optimize our processes? How do we put our people in the position where they're empowered, and how do they take action? Yeah. I think those features are very important to driving the optimal choices in supply chain in any given moment.
Can you tell us a bit which the supply chain's management tools are essential for optimizations?
I mean, I'm certainly biased toward Kinaxis. And I would say from a platform standpoint, I think the opportunity to plan concurrently. So concurrent planning is this idea that you bring all of the stakeholders together in one platform, looking at the same data, making the decisions together and executing it on it in a moment. That said, you need to be able to understand the demand and supply planning are essential to understanding this. At a time when the historical demand forecast isn't going to have the same importance as it is in the past. 2020's forecast is potentially never going to have the value of, say, something that we would have thought of historically. So how are we able to assess those information? What are the demand indicators that we're looking at? And how do we connect that to the supply in a way that you understand? If you pull a thread, so to speak, well, how far does it go into your supply chain, and what are those implications? So it's not just demand, it's not just supply in a siloed type of environment, but it's really the aggregated process where you're connecting those things. And then certainly scenarios. A number of companies have been able to run scenarios to identify what they need to do in the given moment. In the pandemic, for example, we had a number of life sciences companies tell us about situations where they had to identify product that absolutely had to go air shipments to serve critical patient needs. But they also were able to identify where they had a bit more time on others and they didn't need to ship those via air. We see the opportunity to identify where lead times are changing and to really bring some of those things in and assess what that's going to mean to your business down the road, a few weeks down the road in some cases, not just what's happening to you in the moment. So, I mean, certainly demand and supply planning, certainly scenarios, certainly risk identification. Those are some of the things that are essential to supply chain optimization right now as we're just simply trying to understand information as it comes in and trying to do the right thing. And we're trying to do it over and over again. It's a pretty big ask right now, but those are the companies that are leading, are really putting these things together in a productive way.
All right. So before we close today's conversation, Patrick, what are some other Kinaxis way that you would like to share with our listener?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is that the idea that a perfect forecast is fleeting. For so long, forecast accuracy has been a significant driver of behavior, but we've seen in the last year that things can change human behavior. Nothing has changed human behavior quite like COVID-19, at least in our lifetimes. And so recognizing that the perfect answer isn't going to be there, we need to start structuring our supply chains in a way that we're able to create and identify our paths forward. It's not necessarily that we need to know what we're going to do in any given moment, but we need to give ourselves options. And I think that that's one of the things that companies have struggled with, is that supply chains gotten so good at using bubble gum and duct tape and all of the cliches about saving the day. But supply chain also has the opportunity to really put itself in position to drive the business. We've seen a number of companies during the course of the pandemic and since, where their supply chains have gone to the rest of the business and identified their strategies that will help them be successful. So it's supply chain's responsibility going forward is to really discuss what's possible and what's possible to add value and really give the business a chance to leverage the success of the supply chain in a new way. And that's really where those supply chain leaders are going. And we see a number of them that are already in that position. I think that there's even more to come going forward.
At Bichara Supply Chain, we are committed to driving global perspective to embrace technological adaptation in improving process efficiencies. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Bichara Supply Chain. And stay tuned for the latest updates. To learn more, visit our website www.bicharasupplychain.com. Thank you for listening to us. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode.